I'm Tom Wacha, Director of Product Management at Workiva. Herm Fisher, my colleague, was unable to be here today because he's traveling, but I'll do my best to cover his piece. We do have quite a few things to cover, so we'll go ahead and get started, but we wanted to focus on Arelle and how it can help the open source community as represented by the open filings. So for those of you who may not know about Arelle, Arelle was created in 2010 to do two main things: to improve both the accessibility and the usability of XBRL in order to increase worldwide adoption of the standard. And DPM, of course, is a big part of that. Today, the Arelle project is used by a global community of over 50 regulators, banks, and technology companies that depend on it for both data quality and comparison. And some of those regulators in the Europe include EIOPA and ESMA, as we just heard from, and the US, SEC and FERC, just to name a few. And one last fun fact here, Arelle is the world's only open source XBRL platform. So let's talk a little bit about the stewardship of Arelle. You may have heard back in January that Workiva took over as the primary steward of Arelle. And some of you may be asking, how does that impact Arelle and its future? And the simple answer there is it's going to be business as usual, but better. So Arelle was founded in 2010, as I mentioned. It was founded by Herm Fisher. Many of you know Herm. And up until recently, it was primarily updated and maintained by Herm. And as Arelle grew and continued to benefit the community, Herm quickly realized that it was growing beyond what just one person could manage. So several years ago, he started talking with lots of us in the community, including myself, and we decided Workiva would be in a position to step up and sort of take over that stewardship from Herm. Herm's still working with Arelle. He's probably working with it even more than he had been in the past. But we wanted to make sure that Arelle could continue and grow and prosper. So we're happy to do that as Workiva. The key message here that I want to leave you all with, if nothing else during this presentation, is that Arelle is going to remain a free open source resource for our global XBRL community. Nothing's going to change. It's not going to go private or anything like that. We're not going to monetize it. It's a resource for all of us. So let's talk a little bit about the value of open source. And I know I'm talking to a group here who appreciates open source software, but this is the statement of XBRL International. And I'll just point out two main things here in bold. The purpose of XBRL is accountability and transparency. And that's important because you can't have accountability and transparency without those two pieces that Arelle brings, which are the accessibility and usability. In short, open source software increases the adoption of XBRL. And when XBRL is more widely adopted, we all benefit, obviously, as a community. So how does open source software do that? How does it increase the adoption of XBRL? Really in four ways. First off, it's free, which decreases the overall cost of adoption. That's pretty straightforward. Secondly, it's readily available, which makes it easier to access and try out. Both of those things are lowering those barriers of entry, right? So if there's a new regulator that wants to try out a new potential data requirement and they want to use XBRL or DPM, Arelle is a way that they can quickly experiment with that at no cost. Thirdly, open source increases XBRL adoption because the code base isn't owned by anybody, so it can be modified for individual needs. And we see that a lot. We have lots of companies out there who are downloading the Arelle source code and then making modifications as they see fit, and then using those and even selling those as needed. And then fourthly, open source increases XBRL adoption because it's usable. So it makes XBRL more understandable and more approachable. So again, a key summary here is that the greater adoption of XBRL means more accountability and transparency, as I said before. So how can Arelle in particular now, as an open source piece of software, kind of work with those other products? We firmly believe that open source and for-profit software can not only coexist, but also thrive together. And that's because Arelle is complementary, not competing. So if we dig into that a little bit, Arelle in particular can help foster a greater adoption of XBRL because it's increasing the need for more robust XBRL software. A regulator, take EBA, for example, right? They when they're first starting out, may have used Arelle to test things out, to see what XBRL was about. And, they are going to quickly figure out that they're going to need more than what just Arelle can provide. So that's where some of those for-profit, companies can step in that offer more robust solutions. Arelle also increases greater adoption of XBRL by increasing the market for complementary and related software products. Two examples are XBRL generation, which there are entire companies that are based on that, and then also data analysis. Again, whole companies that are profiting from that data analysis need out there in the market that Arelle helps to drive. And then thirdly, Arelle increases competition by making it easier for proprietary software to fill new markets and solve new problems. The short answer here is, the more XBRL proliferates, the more data standards proliferate, the more DPM is used, the more opportunity there is for open source and non-open source software, and the better the community is as a whole. And another key point here is that Arelle isn't the only choice, and it won't be the only choice, and it shouldn't be the only choice. So next, we'll talk about sort of 4 key objectives for Arelle, and then where we're going to move moving forward in the future. So we want Arelle in the next year to be easier to use, to be easier to consume. We want to increase contributions from all of you in our community. And we want to increase specification support for Arelle. So digging into each of these, here's some improvements that we've made in each of these 4 areas. We've made Arelle easier to use by setting up enterprise-grade software development lifecycle documentation to include permissions, responsibilities, merging rules, how we're managing contributions of code from the larger community. So we've put a lot of structure in place around that, which will make it easier for people to submit code and contribute. With regard to making it easier to consume, we've improved documentation, including the README and install instructions and plugin documentation. Probably most significantly, we've made Arelle pip installable, which really drastically cuts down the install time. And we've been working a lot, Herm in particular, on improving the ESA formula speed. We know that's been a criticism of Arelle in the past, and we wanted to make some progress there. We are increasing contributions by activating the Issues tab in GitHub for easier feedback and questions. And we're increasing specifications by getting initially certified by XBRL International for OIM. And certified, we are certified now for supporting the table link base. So what are we going to do in these 4 areas moving forward? I'll give you a preview of that. So under making Arelle easier to use, we want to improve the CI and the build process. And we also want to improve testing framework to speed up the contribution acceptance time. That's another key thing to point out. When Herm was doing this by himself, he didn't always have somebody to do code testing and make sure that things were as solid and reliable as they could be. And now with Arelle being the steward, we've got a lot more contributors, and code reviews are regularly being performed. We're going to make Arelle easier to consume by performing improvements primarily around formula, XBRL CSV, and XML parsing. And we're going to continue to increase contributions from the community by promoting Arelle, like we're doing today at this conference. We've got blog posts that we're going to regularly be sending out, and then also newsletters. And lastly, we want to increase those specifications. We're going to improve table link-based processing, and then continue to add support for XBRL, various taxonomies, and as needed as new things come up. And then the last thing at the bottom there is other opportunities the community deems important. So again, this isn't just Tom Walker or Herm Fisher deciding what we should do. We really want your input to see how you're using Arelle and how it can better serve the community. Speaking of community, a few slides that touch on this. So these are two pie charts. On the left, you see Arelle commits by user for calendar year 2021. And you can see at the bottom there were 3 total contributors. And I'll let you guess which one was Herm Fisher. It's that big, huge blue. 98% of all of our Arelle commits to the GitHub repo were by Herm, and only 1.8% were other people. And those are only 2 other contributors besides Herm. Fast forward to just this year so far. So for the first half of 2022, we've got 11 total contributors, and you see that Herm slice, that blue slice, is much smaller. It's now down to 61%. So we're really happy about that, and Herm is as well, I can promise you. He didn't want to have everything on his shoulders and have to be the one to do everything for Arelle. So we're going to hopefully continue this trend and flip that. It'd be nice to get Herm to about 30%, 25% in the community to be that larger piece. We've got contributors from 7 countries, so you can see on the map here. So we're really happy about that, but we would like to get a lot more green on this map. And that's it. So, I'll leave you with the message that we're actively looking for contributors to Arelle. The future of Arelle and what it means to this community as an open source resource is really going to be up to all of us and what we make of it. So you can visit arelle.org to learn more and to contribute. And that's everything I have. I'll turn it back to you, Ignacio.